The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky here today, and I'm very excited to have Dan Pontefract joining us. Dan, welcome.
Michael, what indeed a pleasure it is. Thank you for the invite and for being here with me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And you are a leadership strategist. You're an author, a keynote speaker, you're an advisor, and you're also founder and CEO of the Pontefract Group. You've written 4 best-selling books. You've spoken at TED events. You've been featured in publications like Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and you were previously the Chief Envision and Chief Learning Officer at TELUS, which is one of Canada's largest telecommunications companies, where you helped increase the company's employee engagement to record levels. Let's start off, Dan, for everyone who might be wondering, what is a Chief Envision Officer? People may have heard about Chief Learning Officers, but tell us a little bit more about kind of like what your role was at TELUS.
Sure. The wonderful intro, by the way, and you forgot horrible at home improvements. So that all might sound good, but if you talk to Denise, my infinitely better half, not so good at the home improvements. That's where she comes in.
I actually fall in that same category. I do try my best at times, but I'll most often try and get somebody else to help, because if I do it, it doesn't always work out so well.
Denise, one year, quick sidebar story, bought me a birthday gift, and I opened it up and I said, "Oh, thank goodness. I've always wanted a fishing tackle box." And she looked at me, she said, "You're an idiot. It's for tools. It's a toolbox." So that's about the extent of me. So specific to the TELUS gigs, I spent a wonderful 10 years full-time within the organization, having 2 roles. The Chief Learning Officer role, which most people know, that's you're helping an organization with its leadership, its culture, its engagement, obviously its learning, and all bits and parcels that come in between that particular portfolio. What we thought we'd do at the 5-year mark of my tenure was that we would go and help other organizations with culture change, with leadership, with engagement, with flexible work styles. And so we put together a kind of a troubadour outfit, and I acted as its chief envisioner to help other organizations future set the way in which they were operating. So again, that was another wonderful 5-year road, which then more or less led me to become who I am today, which is being more of an external guy, helping other organizations right across the world.
Are you still working within TELUS, or has that shift completely happened?
Again, another remarkably wonderful story, I would argue, with what TELUS is, and I guess I suppose how we work together still. So I left full-time January 1st, 2019 from that aforementioned role. And although the unit that I was running kind of continued, but not with me at the helm, TELUS has employed me ever since now in 2 capacities. One, to continue running what is called the TELUS MBA program, which I put together when I was still Chief Learning Officer. It was a chance for TELUS team members to embark on a 2-year MBA through the University of Victoria's School of Business. And it's just for TELUS, dedicated to balancing purpose with profit. Just a wonderful chance for me to still work directly with team members on that. And then secondly, I still will be trucked out and work with TELUS clients when they need assistance or what have you with culture, with flexible work, particularly in a pandemic, amongst other kind of to be determined instances when I get rolled out in front of some of their clients.
And so for everyone who's listening, who might be in a similar situation where they're in a corporate role and in leadership, they've enjoyed it maybe to a great degree or maybe not so much, but if you've been working with such a great company, what spurred you to go off and do your own thing? What was kind of going on that made you decide, I'm going to start my own business? Great to be able to still work with TELUS, the past employer, right? As it kind of becomes the first client, it sounds like. But for you, Dan, what was the decision, or what kind of spurred you to make that move?
Michael, that's a wonderful question. And thank you. And it actually takes us back to Christmas of 2017, coming back from a family trip from Maui. And so essentially that last day, you're looking at the last sunsets because it's always the night flight coming back from Maui to Vancouver. And I reread one of my own books because, you got a few hours to kill on a plane, and I don't really ever sleep on planes. So I reread The Purpose Effect, which was my second book. Sounds like a book plug, but it's not. That book actually forces you to consider three types of purpose. What's your personal purpose? What you believe, what you stand for, what gets you up, what's your mojo, right? What are your dislikes? But then there are two other types of purpose. There's organizational purpose. Does that place in which you work stand for something greater than itself, than profits, than EBITDA, et cetera? And TELUS had that in spades. I mean, I was locked in on their purpose for sure. And then role purpose. Do you feel valued? Are you able to contribute value? And you feel that your mojo, that's your personal purpose, is in alignment with your role purpose. And I was realizing that I had just crossed the 10-year mark at TELUS, and I had my father, 73-year-old living in England, on my shoulder, as the devil might be in some of those cartoons, whispering into my ear, Michael, like, don't you think it's time to put on your big boy pants? Don't you think it's time? And so as I'm rereading the book, I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't not die at some point in my life, as we all do, and live a life of regret, or be in a bed, if you will, waiting to pass away of regret, thinking I've never given it a shot. And so I was really in disarray a bit personally with my own personal purpose. But although I love TELUS and I loved my role, it was actually now out of sync.
Yeah. How long would you say that you were thinking about that? Like the idea of entrepreneurship, starting your own business, how many years prior did that kind of seed get planted in your mind?
I suppose it started when I started writing books and started doing external keynotes, which was in 2012. So I was fortunate to continue, obviously, to be at TELUS, wrote a book called Flat Army, wrote a book then, The Purpose Effect, then wrote a book called Open to Think, about a better way of thinking. And these books were all under, quote, the TELUS dime, written at night, of course, et cetera. But I kept thinking, okay, well, I've started my own business because I'm writing. So you're getting paid royalties from books, not a lot, but enough to say, oh, you're in business. But really, it was when I started that TELUS Transformation Office role, that function of working with external clients more so than ever, really realized to me that, oh, I can be in that consultative mindset. I can be in the consulting business, if you will. Not only can I deliver keynotes and workshops, but people actually want to tap into sort of my brain, if you will. If that sounds too egotistical, just stop me, Michael, for some of the wares and experience that I have to help them. And so as much as I loved doing what I was doing for TELUS, I thought to myself, maybe there's a win-win here. Maybe there's a way in which that I could help TELUS, but I also could help me personally, and then sort of launch myself into the Pontefract group as we launched on January 1st, 2019.
And now, why did you even start writing books, right? There's a lot of people in the corporate world who they're getting a nice salary, they've got their benefits, they're comfortable. The last thing on their mind is to create more work for themselves by writing even articles or speaking. And there are, of course, many people who have taken that same path that you have, but I'm interested in your perspective. I mean, what was the drive or the kind of the excitement or the desire for you to start creating your own intellectual property and content, even when you were in a quote unquote kind of stable corporate job?
Yeah. Another fabulous question. You know what you're doing with these. So 3 answers. The first of which is pretty simple. It keeps me married. Out of Denise's hair is a good thing. So there's that. But more seriously, on points 2 and 3, number 2, I have stuff to say. I mean, my brain is kind of moving all the time. And so I was fortunate to be asked to write for Forbes. I've done a couple pieces in HBR. I've been speaking a lot. And it just sort of made sense to me that I begin the journey of getting some of my thoughts out there, not just in articles, but in thicker tomes.
Don't mind actually just to stop for a second. Why did you start speaking, Dan? Like, where did that come from? Again, a lot of people are in the corporate role. They would just be comfortable doing what they're doing. They're focused on their team and the business. But you went external. Did that come from the CEO of the company saying, hey, Dan, we need you to go out and to build our brand and to be more visible at conferences? Or was that a decision that you kind of arrived at yourself? Where was that drive for you to actually get out?
Great. So I came from being a senior director at SAP with its education services function, so doing all kinds of funky things, when I joined TELUS in the year 2008. When I joined TELUS, looking back at the SAP experience, I was dabbling in some public speaking, but not a force to be reckoned with, if you will. And so I consciously made a decision when I joined TELUS in December of 2008 to become way more public in both speaking and writing.
Why?
And it took 3 to 4 years to continue pushing myself, making myself be known, if you will, both for the writing and for the speaking. And that lent itself to a book publisher, Wiley, seeing me from an audience on stage and saying, maybe you should write a book, Dan. So it was very conscious. Now, to get to point 3, which actually relates to this question with speaking, I didn't think about this at the time in terms of how Dory Clark puts it in Entrepreneur You, and Dory being a really good pal of mine, but it's to diversify yourself. When you find ways of both diversifying yourself out there publicly, speaking, writing, some other things you might be able to do, you set yourself up for the success, I believe, and the potentiality of you maybe doing something different than what your role is. Like basically my playbook, which was in 2008, I'm going to be public because you just don't know. I'm going to write books. That's part of diversifying. The speaking's diversifying. The role I created next at TELUS with TTO, the TELUS Transformation Office, was another diversification strategy, which then allowed me to then, to your point, have an anchor client when I left, but to have all these different tentacles, if you will, or even antennae out there in the world to potentially be asked to do some business with. And I mean, knock on wood, so far, so good.
Would you say that the steps that you've taken to diversify, even though it was a lot more work for you, and some people might say, well, that's a lot of work, why do you spend all that time? Has that actually created a lot more stability for you now as you kind of look back at what you've established?
Oh, I mean, yeah. If you put the hard work in up front, the diversification plan, and if you're doing it by still having a paycheck, not ignoring your kids or your wife or your health, then I believe, at least my example, without sounding un-Canadian and thus pretentious, it actually can work. So I didn't think of what type of success I'd have back in 2008, but to be able to be asked to do 4 TEDs, to be asked to write at HBR and Forbes, to be asked to write a book, which turned into 4, I look back and say I'm pretty proud of what I've done. But again, if I look at revenues, just by example, because I know a lot of folks listening in will say, oh, what's the revenue base? Well, without knowing the actual figure, I'm making more in 2019 than I did in 2018 with a full-time paycheck at TELUS. And even in a pandemic year in 2020, I'm making more than I did in 2019. So something is working. And again, knock on wood, that I continue not to be overly arrogant, but to take care of your clients. And it's not about money, it's about serving. And if I can serve, then the money comes.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and not to put words in your mouth, but developing your intellectual property content has been really at the forefront of driving this business. Would you say that's accurate?
I think that's completely accurate. Yeah.
Okay. So for those who are listening, watching, going, yeah, Dan, I get it. I know I need to put myself out there more. I know I have value that I can contribute, that I can serve, and I can make a difference. But they actually haven't leaned in. They haven't started to write articles or post videos or create white papers or do webinars or written a book. So they've been thinking about content creation for quite some time. They know the value of it and they can see that all around them. Like the proof is there, but they haven't actually started. What would you say to someone in that position right now that might not be putting in the work? Any advice for them? Any best practices? Any thoughts as to, Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, twofold. A, get off your ass. Like nothing comes to you without hard work. But secondly, stop comparing yourself to Seth Godin and Simon Sinek and Susan Cain and some of the giants that have indeed done this already, and they're making gazillions of dollars. Your metric is not the celebrities. You will find your niche once you put the power and the time and the effort into it. So step 1, get off your ass. And step 2 is stop comparing.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching Program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
What would you say as you kind of look back on the last couple of years or so of running your own business, what's been most difficult for you? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Well, frankly, I'm an egregiously optimistic, open people person. And although that's a bunch of words all discombobulated together there, I do miss leading people and I miss teams. Now, I'm part of a bunch of consulting projects, and so you actually are part of a team, but it's different. I mean, I'm turned 50 next year, and so for the better part of 25 years, I was leading teams, organizations. I had a team. I would do performance reviews. I would coach. I love it. So I honestly do miss the natural, innate, I suppose, leadership tendency that I have, which is to lead people and to do it with affection, compassion, and love. So I miss that, although the books and the writing and the speaking all speak and write and kind of purport to that. That's the biggest thing that I do miss, Michael.
You mentioned that your revenue is up in 2020, even giving the pandemic, the uncertainty, all the challenges that we're all facing. And you're not alone. We've seen that in our business. We've seen that in many of our clients' businesses that we work with as well. But a lot of people are concerned about, or at least it's top of mind for them, how can they deliver value to their clients when they can't meet them in person? Or at least that's a lot more challenging to do. You mentioned, right, you're giving keynotes virtually. You're working with clients virtually. What have you found? Are there any kind of best practices, Dan, or anything, kind of tactics, tips that you would offer to people so they could still provide great value and that feeling that they might be able to have when they're working with a client in person, but now virtually?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I've been able to grapple with. I mean, it's not as though in 2008, I had pandemic on my dance card or bingo card for 2020, nor did I have it on January 1st, 2019 when I went solo. But let's say when the world fell off a cliff in mid-March of 2020, there was a bit of a reset that we all had to do. And even for me, and I mean, I had 10 face-to-face gigs cancel in the month of March that were booked until basically the end of June. And when I say canceled, I mean done. We're not going forward. We don't want virtual because no one wanted to do virtual back in mid-March. Now, as kind of things progressed, one of the first things I did was I ran something called Speak Aid. So I thought about my youth. I thought about Live Aid that occurred in Philadelphia and London. I said, well, why don't we do that for speakers who are, quote, out of work right now? Even though I have consulting gigs and other things going on, I was kind of thinking empathically about these speakers. So we ran a 5-day, 8 speakers a day, 1-hour speaking slot to raise money for Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. And we raised like 35 grand, but it was a chance for me to give back for free, if you will, to a bunch of folks that could join in and listen in on these great speakers from around the world. And we had like 3,000 people show up on a daily basis to these things. So my point being is, if you can strategize, at least to the point in which you're able to, what could you offer pro bono and then provide potentially a new network or an additional network, some goodness that is helping them for a specific need that you have as in terms of your expertise? I think that does go a long way. I mean, a second example was I created 2 portals. One was a flexible work portal for leaders, like remote leadership. And then another was, oh, you're a remote employee all of a sudden. What do you do? And these 2 free portals, which had basically about 15 videos each and job aids, got downloaded like thousands of times. And again, some of that turned into Oh, I bought your book. Thanks for the flexible work. Oh, could we hire you for a workshop because I saw your portal? Hey, could you do a keynote for us? Or, hey, we're thinking about a culture assessment based on your portal I saw about flex work or remote leadership. We think you might know what you're doing. So a little bit of the lost leader stuff I think is really important anytime. But in a pandemic, I was very specific to kind of think about what might I offer for the clients. So I'll give you one last example. So I just published a book called Lead Care Win, How to Become a Leader Who Matters, came out at the end of September. And I knew that what I wanted to do was also release a complete online learning program for leadership development based on these 9 lessons found in the book. So between April and August of this year, I was inquiring with folks to see if they want to be part of a beta so that they could help test the program as I was developing it. So building up a base and building up folks, we're providing feedback, but then maybe stir up some interest when the program goes live, which incidentally, November the 13th. So again, pro bono, thinking of ways in which to provide lost leader expertise, I think is a smart action for any consultant to take.
So now you mentioned those 2 kind of leadership programs that you put together, or one for leaders, one for the employee who's dealing with remote work, right? So I think that's a really great concept. A lot of people have thought about how to productize their own knowledge and package it, which is essentially what you've done there. But you mentioned that you got several thousand downloads. Tell us a little bit more about how did you do that? What do you do from a marketing perspective or to actually get the word out around these programs? Because listen, there's a lot of books, a lot of courses out there that no one ever sees because they haven't been marketed or communicated effectively. So just to kind of take us through the best practices and what you've learned that actually worked really well for those.
Great question. So again, I believe one of the adages that supports me and fuels me through a lifestyle, both working for an organization and being on my own as a company of one, as Paul Jarvis describes it, is my network is my net worth. And so I truly believe in tending to, curating, nurturing, watering, adding fuel and oxygen to your network at all times. It's not a project for an hour on Fridays. It's a constant, how am I checking with the network? Who else might I be connected to? How might I introduce somebody? Am I sending artwork, which I do from local artists here on Vancouver Island where I live, to people I might have just met or who hired me to say, hey, like it's just a complete necessity, but I find it a joy to tend to that network. Otherwise, it's not your network.
Quick question for you on that before you go for it. How do you do that? Like just from a technological management perspective, are you using a CRM? Are you using a spreadsheet? Do you have an assistant? Just take us through how you actually stay on top of that whole process. Because for someone like yourself, who's met a lot of people, given lots of talks, I'm guessing you're not talking about just 10 people, right? There's probably maybe hundreds of people or at least a core group. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I would hope that I have a relatively smart brain to remember things. That's not always the case. So 2 things. One is I use Evernote and tend to make notes about people that I've met or things to remember them by, whether it's their kids, whether it's the job, whether it's something that they've said before. So Evernote is my place, my compendium of kind of anecdotes. But until recently, probably about 2 years ago now, just before I left TELUS, I started in with LinkedIn Navigator. And what a way in which to also provide some notes, some context, see who's connected to whom, and to, again, tend to it from a perspective of not who's in my network, although that helps, but who's connected to whom and how might you provide and offer up additional freebies. So again, back to diversifying your portfolio of things that you do, at least in my case, as much as Lead Care Win, the book came out about 5 or 6 weeks ago, off of my publisher, I bought another 2,000 copies of the book. And I've now sent out 1,000 of those copies across the world based on, again, connections that are direct or often, probably I would say 40% of those 1,000 books are people that have never met me before. But in the letter, when I send it out to the contact, I make reference to someone within the network or some organizational tidbit that I picked up on, or maybe they've written something or whatever that I've kind of taken note of. And I say, I really want to recognize this or that, or this person or this organization or what you wrote. And I just wanted to give you kind of a copy of Lead Care Win as a way in which to say thanks for what you're doing in society. So again, there's a freebie, cost me whatever, $10 to ship the book, let's say. And hopefully, again, that's just an act of network building. And again, I play the long game. You never know when that comes back in the boomerang.
And so walk us through how you're doing that part of it. You're talking about here 2,000 copies. I'm guessing that you're sending more than one copy potentially to each person, or is it?
Yep, sometimes.
Okay. So first of all, how did you get their addresses? Do you buy a list?
You sleuth. You do your sleuthing. I've never bought any list. I don't believe in that. I believe in doing the hard work. And so once I get it, then obviously I'm tracking out an Excel spreadsheet. That's it. Like just a way in which to basically then send out mail forms through Word. I mean, this is not rocket science stuff.
Right.
And you go from there.
And you're doing that yourself. You have an assistant help you with that?
Company of one. Paul Jarvis, go interview Paul. That's all I am. I'm just a company of one.
Yeah. And so shipping as well. Are you doing that yourself, or that's just going to the mailing house?
Well, there's the one thing that comes into play. So I just so happen to have Denise and I are raising goats, as we call them. They are also known as children. So they are 17, 15, and 13. And so sometimes they get roped into the stuffing of envelopes with books and shipping them out. So yes, I may have some family support. It's not like they're my conciliaries or we're in the mob, but they are definitely family.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, one thing you just mentioned right now that really resonates is you're talking about $10 a book, 2,000 copies, $20,000 or so. You're investing into your business. And I think a lot of consultants are by nature quite conservative, right? They focus more on how can they save money with their marketing or what they're doing instead of how can they maybe spend more to create more impact. Where does that thought process come for you? I mean, are you just naturally inclined to go, yeah, I know that if I put out $20,000 that it's going to likely generate significantly more? Or is that something that you've learned over time and you've actually seen work for you firsthand?
I go back to, and again, it's a little bit of this at times, to be dead honest, Michael, and it's the what feels good, what makes sense to tend to that network, and how might that actually result in a keynote, a workshop, a consulting engagement, or whatever, executive coaching. And again, the theory seems to be playing out. So I've had a relatively long runway as well. So again, planning for this took time. First book in 2013, second book 2016, continued to talk, continued to talk, continued to talk, continued to write. Third book 2018, then make a decision, leave, it's 2019, go through 2019, write another book, do a bunch more talks, do a bunch more consulting gigs, and then new fourth book comes out in 2020, pandemic hits. But again, now I'm diversifying with the online learning program, giving that out and making sure that it gets in the hands of executives, CHROs, CLOs, CEOs, et cetera, around the world. So it sounds manipulative, but it's actually distinctly specific to how I believe the network is jogged so that they remember, oh yeah, that Dan, the leadership guy, or oh, it's the Dan I saw speak, or oh, it's the Dan who wrote that book, or oh, it's the Dan from the Forbes article. Oh, it's Dan from the HBR. Oh, it's Dan from that coaching exercise. Oh, Dan gave me the piece of wood, that art from that. Oh, that. It's like, it has to be circular for you to ultimately require your head to invest in. Meaning, to answer your question, if you're not investing, then you're not actually going to be tending to that network, is my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're looking at lifetime value of a client, and it's not always just the revenue, but I mean, you're investing into those relationships. And typically when you do that, good things tend to happen.
I think you said it there, by the way, to interject. Investing in those relationships. So, and again, relationships come at different stages and ages. So I'll give you an example. This past week, I got an inquiry from a chief human resources officer in Toronto. And she, in this case, emailed me and said, Dan, I saw you speak 5 years ago in 2015. And I was really taken aback by that because you're talking about purpose. And again, this is 2 books in, not 4. So 2015. And she said, like, we're having some difficulties in this pandemic. We think it's a good time to kind of exhibit the inclination to go and define where our purpose might be. Could you come help? And could you start with a talk and then maybe see where it goes from there? And that's exactly what's been booked. A talk to discuss what purpose is. And then what more likely will be is in a consulting engagement to then discuss and define and help them as an organization figure out their purpose. So there's a 5-year runway from this lovely woman who reached out to me this past week.
Yeah, definitely. So 2020 has been a year of a lot of new things, or first time for all of us. But if you just kind of look back over the year so far, Dan, what's one thing that has been new for you that you've done that you're very excited about, and that looking back, maybe you feel like, wow, I can't believe that I haven't done this before, and you're excited to continue using that or benefiting from it going forward?
Well, first of all, I've always been a proponent, given what we did at TELUS was shift about 70% of the organization to be remote workers. So from home, a hotel or whatever. And it was just fantastic to drive that, to help drive that at least. What I've seen since the onset of the pandemic is, although the deer in headlights were certainly March through kind of May, June, then all of a sudden organizations and executives started to wake up a little bit and say, well, A, this pandemic thing certainly doesn't seem to be going away anytime fast. And B, maybe we can do some of these things virtually. And the things, at least I'm referring to, are keynotes and workshops. Like that's kind of a lot where I love being on and excel at, is working with people. Now you'd think, well, Dan, don't you miss audiences and live face-to-face people? Of course I do. I mean, I'm an extrovert. I mean, first person I hug is probably going to get a weird kiss as well from me, right? It's just forget. I don't care about the HR violation anymore. But what I've recognized in my own self was that you have to innovate and make sure that in the keynote and the workshops, whether they're 30 minutes or 3 hours, to be completely immersed in how to make it interactive and different. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, if you did a keynote, be on stage. Now, if you're on stage in what is now my souped up kind of home office studio, how could I do that differently? Well, I played around with it. It took me about a month, and I did a couple trials with some clients for free, and then figured out that I needed 3 cameras, a wall-mounted screen, using Poll Everywhere to embed into the PowerPoint slides so people could participate in online polling and surveying right there. And so I basically created a situation in which every kind of 5-10 minutes, there's something that's different or engaging in this room that makes it feel completely like you're in the room itself. And that's kind of the key there for me. Are you using specific technology? I've heard of like Prezi, or are there any tools that you're using to help with that polling or the interaction that you think people should take a look at? My savior is Poll Everywhere. PollEV.com or Poll Everywhere, if anyone wants to go check that out. I'm not an ambassador. I don't get paid by them. What I find is that their interactive polling, surveying, quizzes, word clouding, you can embed right into Keynote or to PowerPoint. It doesn't work with Google Slides, but nonetheless. What I do is I share through another, like I have 3 laptops on the go as well, so that I can have these kind of 3 cameras set up. One camera points to a wall-mounted screen. The Mac that I have on that one airplays through Apple TV, the slides to the screen. I stand beside the screen, I should say, embed the Poll EV slides into that PowerPoint, and then the audience engages. And then I can talk to how the audience is engaging through the surveying, through what horse race is winning and kind of the multiple choice, or the word clouding, or the pictures and who's liking where they're at, et cetera. It actually works fantastically. But again, I've seen people, many quote thought leaders and authors, just go to their homes, flip up their Mac, use the native camera that's built in, and it's just basically a Zoom webinar. That's not going to engage the audience. So you've got to differentiate, and you've got to kind of think about your clients as well, honestly. Yeah, well, clearly you've thought a lot about that with that tech setup. So something we'll need to look into as well, and I appreciate that. Dan, thanks so much for coming on here today. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your work and your books. Where's the best place for them to go? Probably the easiest is the microsite that gets you to everything for the new book. And it's just leadcarewin.com. And you'll be able to learn about the book, but also me and everything else that I might be able to do. Sounds good. We're going to have that linked up in the show notes. We'll also put a link to your main website so that people can just go and check out your services and more about your background. A nice looking site as well. So Dan, thanks so much for coming on here today. Hey, Michael, thank you. I mean, for what you're doing to help prop up and support consultants around this planet. Good for you. And again, this was great discourse. You clearly know what you're doing, but great conversations to poke a little deeper in some of the things that I'm doing. So I appreciate that. Thanks. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.